On first down, they hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked off. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with a second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac. Kenny Moore gets to Deshaun Watson. That's a sack for Kenny Moore. Kenny has a pick and now a sack in the game.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice podcast. Welcome back to the third day of draft week. We are in day 3 of 7 leading up to the 2020 NFL draft. And because of that, we wanted to continue with our series here and kind of profiling some of the positions in the 2020 draft. I'm your host, Cody Felger, Derek Larger, as normal, joining you guys. And today we wanted to look at kind of 2 positions. We kind of were looking at it and trying to break it down and realizing, holy smokes, we would have to crank out a ton of videos in order to try to get each and every position. And so we're going to kind of combine some positions. Today we're going to look at the tight end and also the offensive line. And so first we'll start with the tight end and then we'll move on to the offensive line. And again, kind of what we've talked about on this podcast, it's not necessarily guys who we think won't be available for the Colts. It's going to be more so guys we think could potentially fall to the Colts, whether they draft there at 34 or beyond. And so that's kind of where we're going to go for here with this. And so if there's a guy that you're like, well, why didn't they include him? Probably because we don't think that he's going to be there when the Colts pick. So, Derek, you can start here first with the first guy on our list for the tight ends. Who you got?
Yeah, so this is the tight end that I had listed in my mock draft when I did my 2.0, and that was Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's coming in at 6'6", 262 pounds, 33-inch arms, 10.5-inch hands with a 4.7 40 time. Coming out of Notre Dame, this guy is definitely a big freak when it comes to physical size. Obviously, at the combine, Kmet really helped himself with his 40 and looked good in the field drills. He could potentially, be that first tight end taken for a bunch of different reasons. You're getting a big tight end with a body and, blocking and tight end sort of guy. Your typical Y athlete. And I mean, he's not super special in the passing game, but ultimately, with a guy his size, that's just something that, it's just hard to guard really. And his speed's not crazy, but once he gets into that second level, then, that size just makes it difficult for anyone to guard him. He's not a great run blocker. That's one of the big issues that they've had with people like him. But again, we're not necessarily looking for guys that are a great run blocking tight end. We have that in Jack Doyle, and we got Roosevelt Nix for that purpose. We're trying to look for a tight end that we can use to make it more of a receiving guy. Last season, had 43 catches for 515 yards, 6 touchdowns. Again, he's got great size, and he can be a 3-down starter. Huge jump in production from 2018 to 2019. So just when you look at this guy's physical structure that he is, I mean, you work on his game, and this guy can really be a problem for NFL defenses. All right. We're going to move on to the next guy here. And Cody, what do you think about Cole Kmet first, and then we'll go into your next guy?
Yeah, as a Notre Dame fan, I like Kmet quite a lot. You mentioned he's not the greatest blocker, but the good news is he has the frame to be a solid run inline blocker in the NFL from the tight end position. He's a guy that I think runs really clean routes. He's also a guy that does a good job at getting separation, beyond the line of scrimmage, down the field, getting open. There are certain things that he's going to need to clean up. Sometimes he does, he has good hands, but sometimes he kind of tries to catch it with his chest a little bit. So that'll be something just, continuing to learn, continuing to develop as an NFL player. That's just a trait that he's going to have to kind of put by the wayside. But I like him a lot. I think he's a versatile player who I think that the Colts could use there. Like you said, he's not fantastic at speed, but he's a guy that's a solid speed guy. Tremendous power, lots of power from him. Initially, just natural stuff from him. Lots of upside and stuff, but there's just some things that he's just going to have to clean up. And it's just things, maybe that are very teachable, fortunately, which is a good thing. And I think that he could project into a good tight end in this league. And I think he's a potential fit for the Colts for sure. Moving on now to my guy. This is one guy that I had one of my friends, Jack Borowski. He's a draft guy. Really does a lot of cool draft stuff on his podcasts and stuff. And he's been mocking Adam Troutman to the Colts a lot. And I like Troutman quite a lot. He's 6'5", 251 pounds, 32.5-inch arms, 9.63 hands, which isn't fantastic, but it's pretty decent. 40 time 4.80. He's projected probably to be, I would say, a second to third round pick. So I like him a lot there at 75 for the Colts if he was still available there. Last year he had 70 catches for 916 yards and 14 touchdowns. And he put together a solid week in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. And then then it comes to the combine, and we saw a 4.80, pretty slow 40 time at the combine, and that kind of cooled off some of his hype a little bit. But I still like him a lot. I think he could be a potential steal in this draft, and I know some teams have said that as well. And one reason why I think he has a lot of upside beyond some of the things that I've already said is the fact that when he came into college, he actually didn't come in as a tight end. He came in as a quarterback. And so he's still very young, learning the tight end position. And he's just a guy that I like a lot for the Colts. I think he's a guy that can stretch the field a lot. I think that he can really play well. And if the Colts are able to get him in the third round, I think that's a tremendous deal with a guy who's not a complete player yet. He's not fully to reaching his potential yet, but there's a lot of potential to unlock here with Troutman. He's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, tight end prospect as I've looked and combed through some of these prospects. He's definitely one of my favorites, Derek. What do you think about Troutman?
Yeah, Troutman definitely has the good size and the intangibles to be a good tight end in this league. Like you mentioned, he's not a guy that has amazing physical attributes, or when you're talking about his numbers with his speed and everything else, that's not necessarily great, but he plays football the right way, and this makes up for it in so many ways. He's got great hands, a great route runner. And like you said, he's still young at the position. So that's something that he can continue to get better at with more time and more coaching as well. Now we're going to move on to another guy, Bryson Hopkins from Purdue. Height of 6'3", 240 pounds, 32-inch arms, 10.13-inch hands, 40 time of 4.66. Hopkins this last year had 61 catches for 830 yards and 7 touchdowns. It was decent at the Senior Bowl, but ironically has some size and length limitations, which it's not really that bad when you look at the numbers, but that's just something you could see. But he did run quicker times than a lot of these other guys did. Hopkins again was a solid contributor in 2018. You just look at a guy in Bryson Hopkins, you get a good package of just about everything, especially when you're talking about big play potential. And he's a decent blocker too. So that can be something that I think people are just forgetting. I think the level of disrespect on Bryson Hopkins' name is quite ridiculous, if you ask me. In my opinion, I think he's the best tight end in this whole class when you're looking at receiving options. But then again, we'll just have to see how teams feel about him. But I like Bryson Hopkins and what he brings to the table. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, as far as a receiving threat, I like him a lot too. I didn't watch a lot of Purdue, but it seemed like every time it was on, Bryson Hopkins was making a play. He's a guy I think that is a very smooth route runner again, and that's huge. And he's a guy that I think one thing that I think will be big for whoever drafts Hopkins is he's a guy that has a very good route tree options. Like he's a guy that has a pretty solid route tree overall. He's a guy that I like him a lot in terms of, he's a little bit shorter than these guys, maybe 1 or 2 inches, but overall, he's a guy that I think in terms of receiving threat and kind of where that fits into the Colts, I think it fits really well and it translates really well into what the Colts want to do with that other tight end position. We obviously know Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox. Jack Doyle is a better receiving option than Mo Alley Cox, but both are really good at run blocking. And, even adding a guy like Hopkins, it's like he's one of those guys who we've talked about is a great receiving threat, but he also can help in the run game. So it's not a similar situation to Eric Ebron in that you have to take him out for a certain amount of plays and you can only really play him when you're down in the red zone or when you're passing it. It can kind of help, disguise a little bit what you're doing a little bit more. And so I like Hopkins quite a lot as well. I think he's a solid guy there. Moving on to the next guy, Thaddeus Moss here from LSU. 6'2", 250. He has arms 31.88 inches, hands 9.88, almost 10 inches. He ran just 0.01 seconds faster than Bryson Hopkins in his 40 time at a 4.65. He's projected maybe a second to fourth round pick. And he's a guy that was a mismatch weapon for LSU in 2019. He had 47 catches, 570 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's got a solid build with some quickness and athleticism. One thing that he could improve on, though, is he could improve on his blocking for the NFL. But, he can be a mismatch weapon, like I said, for a receiving tight end. And as a pro, I can kind of see some Jordan Reed type of comparisons here. And, he didn't really work out at the combine, so you can't really say a lot about him there. But, Derek, what do you think about Thaddeus Moss?
Yeah, Thaddeus Moss has some really good hands. You put that on full display multiple times this year. And that really kind of got brought to light when they played against Alabama. Don't look at the numbers. There's a lot of different receiving options for LSU this last season. So Thaddeus Moss's numbers, that you can look at them as either inflated or deflated because of that. But Thaddeus Moss, again, when you're looking at a tight end, yeah, the height's not necessarily great. Arm length isn't super great. But again, he's got good hands. Obviously, he's got that royal blood in him from Randy. So, it's not a bad trait there at all. Ultimately, again, it's another receiving tight end that you need to look at when it comes to improving his blocking. But again, if Thaddeus Moss is there around the 4th round, I wouldn't be opposed to it. We're going to move on here to another tight end, Colby Parkinson from Stanford, 6'7", 252 pounds, 33.25-inch arms, 9.63-inch hands, 40 time of a 4.8. Parkinson last year had 48 catches for 589 yards and a touchdown in 2019 while playing with backups at quarterback for most of the season. Provides a good size matchup. 6'7", that's incredible height. But again, yeah, that 40 time is a little concerning for sure. Stanford's had some decent string of quality tight ends come through over the last few years. Parkinson had 29 catches for 485 yards in 2018. He's had some really good improvement over his years. And again, just the sheer size of this guy is incredible. He's just going to have to work on that speed, but obviously guy can catch, is pretty decent at the run blocking especially since he's bigger than most guys that he's going to line up across. So Colby Parkinson could be a dark horse tight end pick for later in the draft. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Parkinson, but it would be kind of funny, honestly, to see 2012 the Colts draft a guy named Kobe Fleener from Stanford in the second round. What if they drafted a guy named Colby from Stanford in the 2020 draft? I just thought that would be kind of funny to me, but maybe I'm just weird. But anyway, Parkinson, yeah, he's a guy that I think could be potentially kind of a steal in this draft because you mentioned he didn't really play with a lot of great quarterbacks. He kind of had some different, not so great quarterbacks. The Cardinals really haven't had a great string of quarterback luck for a while. No pun intended there, but for him, he's a guy that I think he has the traits that you like in terms of. I feel like he's good at run blocking, and he's also I think he's pretty solid in terms of his passing game. I mean, he's a guy I think that has really strong hands. He's a guy that I think does a good job at positioning himself to go up and get the ball whenever that's needed. He's a guy that I think, like you said, he'll need some improvement because he's not going to go in the first couple rounds probably. But he's a guy that I think, given the right circumstance, given the right system, could potentially be a good tight end and not a tight end that you have to spend, one of those early round, second round picks or whatever it is. I like Parkinson. I kind of think, maybe you could get him in the fourth or fifth round, even if you want to, if he falls to there. He could be potentially just a guy that, the numbers don't tell the whole story. There's a lot of factors there, whether that be the type of offense that Stanford runs, whether that be mentioned the quarterback play. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but I wouldn't mind him there at a fourth or fifth round pick. And moving on now, Harrison Bryant is the next guy on our list. He's 6'4", 242 pounds, 31.38 arms, 9.25 hands, 40 time, 4.73. Probably going to be a mid to later round pick, probably rounds 4 through 6. But in 2020, he had 65 catches for 1,004 yards and 7 touchdowns. He received an invite to the Senior Bowl and was pretty decent down there. And he also had a pretty good showing there at the Combine. And, for Florida Atlantic, Bryant was a quality receiver. He's been a quality receiver the past 2 years. In his junior year, he had 45 catches for 662 yards, 4 touchdowns. And so he's just a guy that I think he's a good option. He's been productive in college. He's a guy that, maybe one thing that he could improve in the NFL is just getting stronger overall and also improving in his run blocking. Those are just some knocks on him, but, I think he has decent size. He has, his 40 time isn't the greatest, but, he could, like I said, he could improve that and also improve his strength there. But, what do you think of Harrison Bryant here, Derek, as potentially a mid to late round guy?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with his weight. He definitely needs to gain about 10 pounds in muscle for sure. 40 time, like you said, it's not that impressive, but playing in Florida Atlantic system to have 45 catches for 662 yards and 4 touchdowns, it's pretty good. Drastically improved and from when he was first starting in 2016. So definitely a guy that, is a very interesting idea at tight end if the Colts are willing to go that late for a tight end. And now here we got our last tight end of the group before we move into the offensive line, and that is Hunter Bryant, the tight end from Washington. This is a guy that, Cody, you had for your mock draft here recently. So this is a guy that you know really well. 6'2", 248 pounds, 32-inch arms, 10.38-inch hands, pretty decent-sized hands, 4.74 40 times, so about the same as Harrison. A guy that you could see going from the third and fifth. Bryant was widely regarded as one of the top receiving tight ends of the 2019 season. Had 52 catches for 825 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, Bryant in the NFL will have to be a rotational receiving tight end. He just really doesn't have the size to be a 3-down tight end. Because I mean, being 6'2", 248 pounds, weight's kind of there, but being only 6'2", that's not necessarily great height. And obviously that can hurt him as a blocker. He ran slower than what some people originally thought he was, because he definitely plays fast, but that 40 time was certainly not great. But again, it's kind of the same thing as Harrison. You got a guy that could potentially find his way in the middle of the draft. Is a big play specialist, so you just got to take it with what you get. Cody, what are you thinking of Hunter? You did select this guy before.
Yeah. He's the guy that I think he said Bryson Hopkins. I think he's pretty close there to Bryson Hopkins in terms of a receiving threat. He's a guy that a lot of people I've actually seen have compared him to even like just a bigger slot receiver in the NFL. That would translate to that. And so, he's a guy that I think he's really good at, different routes, like sit routes, crossers, over routes, fades. Like he's good at all those things. He's very quick at the top of his routes. He has good burst, which I think is good and important. He's a very versatile guy as well. He's a guy that I think he is a guy, like I said, he can play tight end, he can play slot receiver. He can do a few different things, and he can kind of threaten all the levels of the defense as a route runner. And so he's a guy that I think also one good thing about him is he's good at contested catches. He has a very good concentration when going up for the ball, which is big. He's a guy that is it's cool because he's a guy that you mentioned he didn't have a great 40 time. Well, kind of looking at some of the tape, he's a guy that has some good. I've talked about it before. We call it rack. Receiving yards after the catch. He's a guy that's good at that. And he's a guy, that is a very fluid athlete as well. He's very good at controlling his body. He's a guy that's good in figuring those things out, which is important, especially as a receiving tight end. He's a guy also that's very smart. He's a very, very smart. It has good IQ for football. He's a guy that he's got to, he's not going to be a great run blocker because of his size. He's only 6'2". He could, he's only 240 pounds. So he could put on some weight if he wants to try to get better at run blocking. But he is a guy, that's probably going to be more of a receiving option at the NFL level. So that's kind of my thoughts there on Hunter Bryant. I like him a lot, kind of in that secondary role behind Jack Doyle. So that's why I selected him and I believe it was a 3rd round pick, number 75. That's why I selected him there. And now we can move on to the offensive line. And I'll start with a guy, funny enough, I actually mocked to the Colts in my mock draft. And Derek kind of gave me crap for it because, let's be real, this guy's probably going to go in the 1st round. And now that I look at it a little bit more, I'm like, probably. I probably shouldn't have mocked him as far down as I did. But Josh Jones, offensive lineman. He is 6'5", 311 pounds. He has 33.63 arms, 10.13 hands. He ran a 5.27 40. He's probably going to go 1st or 2nd round. And some people think, this is a very deep tackle class, and some people think that he's going to probably be the 5th tackle off the board. And some other people argue maybe Austin Jackson is going to be off the board. But and so a lot of people also feel like either Jackson or Jones here, after one of those guys, whoever is the 5th tackle off the board, there's a big drop off in offensive tackle after that. And so that's why some teams and some people feel like maybe he could go in the 1st round. Maybe there could be a run on tackles in the 1st round because it's so deep 1 to 5, but then 6 through whatever, there's a big drop off. And so 2019, he was a good player. Jones was. He's a guy that a very good pass protector for Houston. He's a guy that some teams have said they like his potential fit in the NFL world. He has good size. He has good length, good athleticism, good agility. He's maybe not the most overpowering offensive tackle. And he probably could gain some muscle there, get a little bit stronger. But he dropped some weight prior to his senior year, and there's also maybe some knocks on him with a little bit of technique issues as well. And he could stand to potentially get coached up on that a little bit. And maybe, that'll be something to be a knock on him. He can't afford to get sloppy in the NFL because it's going against the best in the world. And that's just something that he's going to have to clean up as an offensive tackle in this league, presumably a left tackle there. And so, why we think it could potentially fit with the Colts if he is there available is probably because, like you mentioned, there's some technique issues. And the beauty of anybody coming to this Colts offensive line is that they most likely won't have to play a lot. And knock on wood, but they probably won't have to play a lot in 2020, barring an injury. And so, there was that offensive line last year. They played together every single game. It's very rare that happens in the NFL, but it's a guy that's not going to get thrown in there right away day one as the starter at left tackle. It's a guy that you can stand to let sit a year or two, depending on what Anthony Costanzo decides to do. And then you can let him continue to grow and let him continue to develop. Anthony Costanzo, one of the top tackles in the league, could definitely teach him a lot of things about being a good tackle in this league. And then you get your future left tackle, potentially. And that's huge. We know left tackles don't just grow on trees. And so if you get him in the second round, I think that could be potentially a good fit. What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, you said everything there. I mean, ultimately, his biggest knock on himself is, he lost a little bit of that weight and, kind of hurt him a tad bit in his strength and hitting at the point of attack when it came to run blocking. But, I mean, this guy's a phenomenal pass protector. He's still pretty decent in the run game. And being behind Anthony Costanzo, if he were to actually be available in the second round, because a lot of people have him as the fourth or fifth best tackle in this class. And I think the majority of people are saying that there's going to be four left tackles taken within the first 20 picks of this draft. So, Josh Jones may not make it out of the first round. Who knows? But Josh Jones definitely is a good one there. And here's another guy who's been getting some buzz recently is Isaiah Wilson. I know Wilson is more of an interior guy, but he played a lot of different positions, but he did switch over to left tackle after a certain point, but he did play a little bit inside. Isaiah Wilson from Georgia coming in at 6'6", 350 pounds, 35.5-inch arms, 10.25-inch hands. I mean, he's just absolutely gigantic. There's a lot of people who actually believe that Isaiah Wilson will actually get drafted in the first round, which if this is as deep as what they say it is, then yeah, Isaiah could potentially do that, but I'm not necessarily buying that hype. I think ultimately, you're talking just about the sheer size of somebody of this caliber. I mean, he's so big, it almost makes Mekhi Becton look small. I mean, really it does. But yeah, I mean, it's really awesome to see Isaiah Wilson. He's just needs to work a little more on his a little bit more on his footwork. Being that big, that's it's definitely something that's hard to work on. I mean, obviously for his size, he doesn't get bullied backwards on bull rushes. He definitely can eat up a pass rush and just swallow people when it comes to when you're running the football. He actually is surprisingly quick for somebody that's that big. Like I said, again, it just needs to be, he just needs to get his foot quickness better. and he just needs to, continue to work on the fundamentals in his feet. And sometimes when he does his first punch, but again, this is a guy that, the size of him is just incredible. And if he's available in the second, third round, and the Colts think Isaiah Wilson can be a guy that you could see in the future, then that could be an interesting option. What do you think, Cody?
What a ginormous guy this guy is, Isaiah Wilson. Ginormous, 6'7", 340. Wow. He's massive. He's got a massive frame. And the cool thing is, it's not like he is massive and needs to lose some weight. It's like he doesn't have a lot of bad weight on him, which I think is great. He's a guy that, because he's so big and because his arms are so big, if he gets his punch on you, he gets his hands on you, it's over. Forget it. You lost that rep. He's just a guy that, is so big and so powerful. It's like when he gets you, you're done. He's just that big. He won't let go. But with that, some of the cons on him is just his hand placement, something that he's going to have to continue to develop. And I think, working with some of the best, guys at the position, with that, and working with, Chris Strauss with the offensive line coach, I think that's just something that's teachable. It's not like he's lacking anything physically. He's just a guy that needs to continue to develop and figure out where the right hand placement is. If he can figure that out, man, he could be the dominant offensive tackle in the league for sure. He's a guy that also probably needs to go to a little bit better awareness in terms of pass blocking. You mentioned Derek, just his feet and kind of figuring that out, and not losing his balance as well. Just continuing to develop his game. Fortunately, if he got drafted by the Colts, like similar to all these guys we're going to look at, he doesn't have to start right away. He can have some years where he can redshirt basically and kind of watch and kind of grow and learn. And, also, looking at some of this, even looking at like training camp, whoever the Colts draft, if they do draft a guy this early, one of these offensive tackles, they're gonna have the chance to spar with some pretty darn good defensive ends, and in Justin Houston, Kamoko Toure, and some of those guys. And I think that'll just help them. Iron sharpens iron, and I think in this case, it's potentially something where Isaiah Wilson could be one of those guys who could be a dominant. Can you imagine that? Isaiah Wilson and Quentin Nelson, two of the big, powerful guys on the same offensive line. That would be insane. Next on our list, we have Trey Adams, 6'8", so he's massive as well in terms of height, 318, arm length of 34.38, hands of 9.88, 40 time 5.60. He's probably a second to third round pick. He was actually a guy that some people have projected Jacob Eason. He was his teammate, and he did a good job last year at protecting Eason, opening holes for the offense, for the running backs, and also, just holding at the point of attack really well. He had some trouble though with, look at Utah's Bradley Anae in the second half after dominating him until halftime. But some scouts have said that Adams has impressed them during fall camp, and they think that he could be, a second day pick depending on his medical report. That was something. He had one thing was in 2019, he had surgery on his back. He missed a large portion of the 2018 season, but he eventually returned to the field and did well considering what he was coming back from. So there's no doubt that this guy, Adams, is talented, but he's had a major injury now. And that will, potentially have significant durability concerns for him at the NFL level. He's just a guy that, could potentially be a guy that has the physical tools and just needs to continue to develop them, and potentially a guy you take there and kind of say, hey, maybe this guy's worth the risk. We believe this guy's worth the risk. Derek, what do you think about Trey Adams?
Yeah, again, another guy that just has gigantic size when you're looking at it. Obviously got beat by Bradley Anae, but I mean, Bradley is one of those guys that is being reported to be one of the top defensive ends of this draft. So certainly good competition there. Adams is really talented. He's just had issues with injuries. I mean, it's just, again, something that you're just going to have to take a look at. Has been injured twice significantly. So you have to wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing here when it comes to the draft stock. I mean, they say that Adams might be the sixth or seventh best tackle in this draft, to be honest, if he didn't have to worry about his injuries. But here we are where we're just going to have to wonder. All right, we're going to move on to a next guy here, and it's somebody that Cody and I have both had in our mock drafts for the Colts to look for at one point or another, and that is Matt Part from Connecticut. 6'6", 310 pounds, 35-inch arms, 9.75-inch hands, ran a 5.06 and a 40. In 2019, Part continued his starting streak at right tackle, but then moved to left tackle. Had a good week at the Senior Bowl, had a good skill set. Part would probably start out as a backup, but could eventually get up there to be an edge blocker. He's got good athleticism, good feet, and he's got good quickness for the position. They think that he could be a steal in the third round if you get him. Ultimately, he's just got to get a little stronger, and he's just got to get more aggressive at the point of attack. But again, he's got the intangibles and the athleticism to be a left tackle in the NFL. So Matt Part certainly is an interesting option to look at in the third round. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, you mentioned it, Derek. He's smooth with his athleticism. He's a guy that he has a lot of natural ability. He's a guy that has he's very flexible. He has good body control. He's a guy that is very good at not getting his feet skinny, if that makes sense. He's a guy that is a tough guy, which I think is important. He's a guy he's kind of scrappy. He kind of gives me those scrappy type of vibes from an offensive tackle. He's a guy that, he's just a competitor, and he's a guy that, there's a reason why he's probably, if the Colts pick him, it's probably going to be, late second, early third, wherever it is. But I look at him as potentially a guy that has a lot of natural ability. He just needs to get coached up a little bit. And we know the high level of coaches the Colts have. And so, he's just a guy that I like a lot. He's a guy that I've just, he has some issues. Let's not say he's a perfect prospect, because he's not. But he's a guy that has that ability, and if he can just refine his craft similar to the other guys, I think he could be a good potential, left tackle, right tackle, wherever you put him. He's a guy that I think could be a potential good guy to get for the Colts. And moving on now to our next guy on our list here. We have Ezra Cleveland. He's a 6'6" offensive tackle, 311 pounds. He's a guy that, 33.38-inch arms, 9-inch hands. He ran a little bit faster 40 time, 4.93, potentially second to fourth round pick. Kind of people are I heard potentially the Browns maybe want to go in on Cleveland, which is kind of ironic, but he's a guy that I would probably say second or third round for me. I think that's, because of his 40-yard dash was a big reason why some people said, oh my, maybe Cleveland's a guy that could go in the first round. But some of the knocks on him though, he's a guy that some people have actually said maybe he would be a round 4 pick, maybe even round 5 pick. But some people have said day 2, and across the league, it seems like a lot of people have said he's weak and has a serious lack of strength at the NFL level. He plays tall, and he has to play with better leverage. He doesn't get beat a ton. He probably projects to right tackle. And one thing that would be just kind of a knock is he doesn't have that elite movement skills probably to play left tackle. He actually was compared a little bit to Luke Jokel. He had a lack of physicality, more of a finesse blocker, not so much a power blocker, if that makes sense. Not really a mauler, but more finesse. Derek, what do you think about potentially getting Ezra Cleveland?
For me personally, I don't necessarily like it. I know the national media is hyping this guy up, but I think a lot of people were mentioning it just because of that 40 time being under 5 seconds. Um, I can't go and say that this guy deserves to be a first rounder when you have so many issues with his play. I mean, when you have lack of strength, when you get obviously he doesn't get beat a ton. But I mean, when you're moving more to right tackle, which also kind of beats the purpose of Cleveland getting him at 10, because I mean, if he plays better at right tackle, they just got a right tackle on Jack Conklin. So why would you want to do that? Yeah, Ezra is just, again, another good sized guy, but again, small hands too. Small hands.
Yeah.
He's smooth mover, obviously, but when he's just basically a finesse blocker and he lacks the power, and you can't have that at left tackle. So I'm all out on this one. Here's somebody that we're getting more to the interior lineman now. This is one I'm very, very, very excited about. And I know our friend Zach certainly appreciates this guy. I think he actually had him as one of the top 3 best interior offensive linemen at the Senior Bowl when he went. And that's Jonah Jackson, offensive guard from Ohio State, 6'3", 306 pounds, 32.88-inch arms, 10-inch hands, 40 time at a 5.23. Jonah actually came from, I believe it was, I believe it was Maryland. Believe it was Maryland. It was either Maryland or Rutgers. I can't remember off the top of my head, and that stinks. But he did come from another opponent inside the Big Ten and transferred to Ohio State, and then earned the starting left guard spot, or right tackle spot, I should say. He's played both positions. I mean, the guy is incredible. He had some penalty issues at times early in the season in 2019, but I mean, he was pretty decent at the Senior Bowl. He actually is a Rutgers transfer. I had that on my notes here. How dumb is that? But anyway, yeah, that offensive line in and of itself, it was really good for Ohio State last year, and Jonah Jackson was one of them. Being one of the older guys on that offensive line, really got better as the year went on. He's got great versatility. I know other people aren't necessarily high on him, but he had a decent week at the Senior Bowl, and I think this is definitely a guy that, give a year or two, he could be our potential right guard or right tackle in this system for the Colts. What do you think, Cody, with getting Jonah Jackson?
Yeah, I'd probably take him 4th round. He's a guy that I think is the one positive for him is he's very aware. He has good inside awareness, and just seeing what defenses are throwing. And I think can't be understated how important that is, just to have a guy who knows what's happening, can identify certain things and help the center, and help the rest of the offensive line. He's a guy that I think is really good. He has really light feet, which is good. He's a guy that does really well at finishing plays, so going to the whistle. He's a guy that's not going to give up on plays. He's a guy that's going to keep going. He's a guy, like you mentioned, he's very versatile. He played guard. I think he played 3 of the interior spots, if I'm not mistaken, for Ohio State. And that screams to me Joe Hague-esque type of guy. Like, we know Joe Hague basically played every single position except for center. And he probably could have played center if asked to do that. But I like him a lot just because I think he's a guy that's not going to, command a high pick, but he's a guy that has some upside, and a guy that's very position flexible. I like him. Alrighty, moving on now to the next guy on our list here. Solomon Kindley. Georgia product, 6'3", 337 yards, which is a little bit bigger, 32.25-inch arms, 10-inch hands, 5.20, 40 time. He's probably a 3rd to 4th rounder. I thought he was pretty good for Georgia in 2019. He's very powerful and athletic. He's very powerful as a run blocker and athletic as a pass protector. He could potentially be a guy that could just plug and play right there for the Colts. whatever you do there, maybe you move Braden Smith back to guard or keep Braden Smith at guard and maybe try to play Kindley at guard. Who knows? But he's a guy that I think could potentially, just jump in there and compete for a starting spot right away, maybe with Mark Golinski. And so he's a guy that I think could be a low risk, high reward type of guy. He's decently polished, but he's a guy that's just gonna has to keep his weight in check, and that's just been a big knock on him. That's probably why he's falling probably to the mid rounds for me. But I like Kenley a lot. I think he has a lot of upside. I think he's a guy that if you can help him get his weight under control, he has a big body, he has nastiness, and he's a guy that is just. I think he has a lot of potential here, especially as a mid-round pick. Derek, what do you think about Kindley?
Yeah, you mentioned it. It's just the weight that most people are still having issues when it comes to him. And obviously speed rushers give him a hard time because of that. But obviously with his size, just when he locks on with you and he hits you, I mean, you're not getting away from a big body like that. And they said he has a really nice nastiness to him when it comes to when he blocks. So definitely a good option there for the Colts if they want to continue to build the interior of that offensive line for sure. All right, we're going to move on to another guy here, Shane Lemieux from Oregon. He got a height of 6'4", 310 pounds, arms at 32 and a quarter inch, 9.5 inch hands, 40 time at 5'11", projected to be around the third or fifth round. Lemieux was a really good starter for Oregon in the 2019 season, and he impressed teams a lot. Decent technician with size and potential to be a quick competitor for a spot. He's definitely a guy that at the point of attack, people rave about how fierce this guy is when he hits people. I mean, it's really amazing to hear, especially for a guy that's a second day guy, most likely. He's been a really good left guard and right guard for many, many years for Oregon. He's a well-balanced blocker. Doesn't really do one thing better than the other. He's just a solid guy everywhere. If this is a guy that gets into the fourth round, I would perfectly be okay with Shane Lemieux being a potential Colt, especially for the interior of that offensive line. You could move into right guard. Cody, what do you think of Shane Lemieux here?
Yeah, from simply a power standpoint, I like him as a prospect. I think he's a guy that at the point of attack has a lot of raw power, and that has to be appealing to Chris Ballard and company. Just a guy that can steamroll over some players. He does have some limitations as far as his length. He's only 6'4". He's not one of these 6'5", 6'7", 6'8" type of guys, but he's not short for an offensive lineman, but I think there could potentially be, especially against some of the longer defenders in the NFL, some potential concern there, I guess, if you say. But he's a guy that I think is a tough guy. He's a guy that I think one thing that I like about him is his hand technique. He does, good things about getting defenders out of the gap and also, tossing some defenders out of the way. I like his placement. I think he has good hand placement. And so I think he's a guy that's probably going to be a little bit more refined in terms of his technique, but there are some limitations there that the Colts are going to have to consider. So that's my take here on Lemieux. Moving on now to the last guy on our list, Damian Lewis from LSU, 6'2", 327 pounds, 33-inch arms, 10.25-inch hands, 40 time 5.24. He was pretty solid for LSU in 2019, but there are some concerns that he could be a guy that could have some limitations in the NFL. He's probably going to play right guard in the NFL, but he has a lack of length. He does. He's only 6'2", and you look back at that matchup against Auburn last year, and he was dominated by Derek Brown. And that was exposing some of his issues that could potentially show up at the NFL level. But overall, he's a very powerful run blocker, especially. He has a lot of natural strength. He's a guy that is, in the weight room, he puts up a lot of pretty impressive numbers. But given his size and athleticism, I think that's probably what scares some people, scares some teams off, and probably make him slide maybe third to the fifth round. Honestly, Derek, what do you think about Damian Lewis?
Yeah, I just like Damian Lewis because of the nastiness he brings when it comes to running the football. We know that's the new motto for the Indianapolis Colts offensive line, and Damian Lewis fits right into that. Again, 6'2", obviously it's an issue, but good weight and good arm length, good hands. Like you said, some incredible numbers he puts up in the weight room. I mean, he's a naturally strong guy. You just got to work to try and get some stuff to, um, again, just increase that strength. So that way it kind of makes up for that lack of length. And hopefully Damian Lewis can find himself later in the draft so we can steal it from him. All right. So that's going to do it for the tight ends and the offensive line rooms. We hope you guys enjoyed. And again, for anyone that's watched this and like is wondering, like, at times we may slew our words here. Like, just understand that like it's late at night right now when we're recording this. And I've been up for a long, long time, and Cody did too. We both got off work, but we both went into work pretty early the morning before this, really early. So been up for a long time. I'm tired. Cody's tired. So just understand, we might have had a few difficult times trying to mince words and phrases and everything. But again, we're still pushing this out, doing our best for you guys. We really hoped you enjoyed, and be sure to let us know some other offensive linemen and tight ends that you guys might think are good objects for drafting in this draft, because again, Ballard's going to address both of these needs, we think, in this draft in multitudes of ways. So thank you guys so much again for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.